Willkommen to Property Quorum. Well, once again, here we are, the happy five, coming together to talk about very happy things that we find within the property industry. As per usual, Hamish McLay of Search and Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke LLP, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, and today's very special guest is Michelle Carr, someone I've termed recently the guardian angel of construction because of her fight to help the subcontractor to gain the rights that they can work on projects without fear of not getting paid or supported. But today's topic is going to be one that I'm hoping will get the hackles of some people rising firmly. We're talking today about cracks in the code, exposing the gaps in building control. And to start us off, no other than the phenomenal man himself, apologies for my croaky throat, Hamish McLay. Hamish, well, what are we referring to?
Funnily enough, it's almost several comments that Michelle had sort of made previously, which led me on to this particular topic.
It is Michelle's fault.
You're absolutely. However, I think it was reinforced by what's actually sort of going on down there in London with these clad buildings, because the head of the council there had actually said that everything about a block of flats containing 204 flats in this particular block, they had not met building control in any respect whatsoever. So the only thing to do, they had to cut them all down. And the developer was told that, so the developer very cunningly put some residents in there. So obviously if you've got residents there, they can't knock it down. But I couldn't understand how it got to the state that builder control hadn't passed it and there were people moving in. I couldn't understand that, because it does bring it down to some of the work which I do and the questions I have on the sort of Con 29 form, if you like, is to do with building control. Because it's one of the things that if we're doing work, and it's something that Juliet looks into, of course, she wants to see if there has been anything happening to the property, if it has been extended, that building control have actually sort of been in there, said, thumbs up, all's okay. So I don't know how the heck it gets to the state of being sort of completed.
I'm gonna toss this straight over to Juliet then. Juliet, how can this be legally tenable that you've got tenants moving into a place where building control haven't completed their work and given the thumbs up? How can that even be a thing?
They're obviously in breach of the building control. I mean, before you get to that stage, you've got sort of the pre-occupational planning conditions that need to be satisfied. So you can't put people into a building that's not deemed as safe, etc., but people do it. And perhaps the risk of, or the risk of being fined is far less than the risk of not having someone in there or having to demolish the property. So looking at what costs the developer less, or what costs, the owner less, and perhaps putting the tenants in is just that plug, because there's a whole host of human rights laws, etc., where you can't just chuck people out, you can't just evict them, you can't treat them as squatters, etc. And that might be why. I mean, it just goes to show how big those cracks. We're talking about cracks in the code, and it's not just the cracks; it's the enormity of the cracks.
Well, these aren't cracks; these are chasms.
Horrible. And this is where the regulation has introduced a building safety regulator and given him certain powers in terms of withdrawing people's licenses, imposing sanctions and fines, and we need to do more, sort of the naming and shaming, etc. But what is difficult for me, from a consumer perspective, is it's the innocent party that suffers. You know, we've had people come on the show who've said, look, they've discovered beer bottles in the wall and it's had building control sign off. I've had clients who said to me, look, we're sleeping at night, it's a new build and we're hearing singing in the walls, the pipes are singing, or, it may be something nominal like the hot water's cold and the cold water's hot, things like that. And it is consistent. But is it that we've got a lack of control of these things? We're just letting people, these very wealthy developers, deep pockets, pass some money, get signed off, and they could care less after, because here you are, you've got this NHBC certificate and it's supposed to be a plug all for everything. Or is it that we've got incompetent building inspectors who need some training? And I think what the Act is trying to do is drive change, behavioral change. So if you need to embellish your skills a bit more in terms of building inspection because you're signing off these certificates, then there is that requirement. Otherwise, you'll lose your licensing, which is a start, but it's not enough.
Chris, is this just a harmless mistake, or are we descending into the pits of madness?
I think it's almost ridiculous that we have all these ever-increasing regulations and the local authorities are so underfunded they don't even have people to be able to help.
So this is like a crocodile without any teeth, right?
I think there is teeth to it after the fact. So people will definitely be held to account after the fact, but to actually resolve things as they come up, that's the challenge. So yeah, these organizations need to be funded correctly if they're meant to be implementing and helping people at the point of the construction going up. So these huge delays, building control not getting on site, and obviously there's the potential for corruption from these bigger players with deeper pockets. This seems like the Wild West. I'm not even sure what's going on here.
Well, it must make it miserable for people like yourself. You're trying to buy bona fide property that you can then put humans into as a business prospect. You can't guarantee the quality of the work.
There's so much compliance that needs to be checked, which is fine, but provide the framework, put the framework in place so the business can flow. If we're just going to all be held to account and waiting for these local authorities or even private building control, it's got an additional cost to it, but there's still a slowdown in the process whenever the local authorities are involved. It's like they have no concept of what it takes to operate at a commercial level. And time is money. It's a real big factor in this.
Michelle, welcome very much again. As the discussion, I would think, is right in your corner. It appears to me that we have to wait before things are newsworthy items before people are held to account. I thought the regs were there to catch things along the way. Are we returned to the wild west once more?
So there's something that I want to clarify, which will probably make a lot of sense. Building control aren't responsible for quality. So building control, whether they're a private inspector or a council inspector, they have to make sure that the building's in for regulations. Now, the key things that they are concerned about is, for example, that the drainage works, it's connected properly. They're concerned about fire, so you're making sure fire barriers are in place, fire doors, certification, if it's a large building, sprinklers, smoke extract, that kind of thing. But they don't care whether or not the taps, as Juliet said, whether the taps are the hot and cold or the right way around. They don't care. They don't care whether or not the quality of the plaster work is any good. They don't care whether, obviously the electrics have to be signed off, gas, if you've got it, has to be signed off, but they don't actually have anything to do with quality. It's just the standard regulations. The doorways are wide enough, that kind of thing. And I would think the situation when they've got people in, into the properties, they would have rented it. And generally, as Juliet will know, and Hamish, in fact, everyone here, when you're buying a property, one of the things on a new build that you need to see is the fact that it's got planning signed off and all of the clauses have been signed off, and also it's got building control certificate. You don't ask for that when you're renting. So it's very easy to get people into a rented property without any of that information because they don't have a solicitor checking to make sure that, or defending their best interest. So that's two things. And the reason that everyone has 2 years in order to find defects is because there is nobody checking. And you don't know how a property or problems in a property until you start using it, until the building starts settling and things start moving and people are banging doors and walking around and that kind of thing. That's when all the problems start to arise, which is why you're given 2 years. But
let me jump in there. We've got a comment from Zara Ali Bukus, who says they don't even seem to do that properly. I think referring to your building control.
Yeah, I mean, I've had building control people that have just asked for a picture of one aspect of it, and you could have, I don't know, they want a picture of some drainage in, and there could be 300 meters worth of drainage, and all you show is a picture. I mean, they often ask for CCTV, but it all depends on the person, and we've had this conversation many, many times before. It's about the quality of the individual themselves and how they work.
And dare I bang the drum? It's you're looking for people who have knowledge of that particular area, both geographically and factually. So, if you're using people who are sort of one size fits most kind of thing, a factory conveyancing outfit or some such, you're going to get soft soap at best. So, as you've just clarified for me, for little-brained Gareth, that the building control doesn't mean quality. I've got one last question for you. So, if the fire breaks have to be there, but going back to previous weeks, we've talked to people who the fire breaks weren't there, but on top of that, they were using poor cladding, which could potentially made it a fire risk. That building control don't cover any of that, right?
Building control will put that down to another consultant. So building control will want a facade specialist or an EWS1 form from a specialist. Now, I'm not talking about previous years, but now the current legislation is They want somebody to sign off the design, and that design has to have BBAs, and each component has to work with each component, has to be reviewed before and fully tested into fire regulations. All they want is a report to say that that box has been ticked, and somebody else to take the responsibility and ultimately cover the PI insurance. So they'll want to see the consultant's insurance, the consultant's sign off, and that's it. They're not qualified to say it's there, and they'll want evidence, but the consultant to sign those works off will want evidence from the contractor of photographic evidence of the fire breakers in at every single point.
Hamish, it does seem, I mean, look, you guys know this, but it seems perhaps sad that the tenants aren't in some way represented by someone in the legal profession.
I think this is one of the sad aspects, because Michelle, again, is one of the great things. I mean, with her knowledge, she can actually say this. Whereas if you're buying your property yourself, because Michelle knows an awful lot about this too, conversations we've had in the past about what you have to do with some of these builders to get the whole thing right before you do actually move in, or even in some cases after you've moved in. And unfortunately, I don't know if these building inspectors are regulated in any way at all, but quite clearly, when we go back to the bill, if we look back to the Royal Artillery
keys, that's right.
It's there. The fire protection that should have been in there wasn't actually put in there at the very start when they were built. I think it was 2002 when they were built.
Yes.
The actual fire protection was not there then. They used inappropriate material then, which had not been tested for fire risk. And it was only in one of the cases in 2009, I think it was, when 6 people died, that they found out that this material was dangerous. Now that material is still in Royal Artillery Keys. Now that's
and also in thousands of other locations. It would appear.
Absolutely, it's not just Royal Artillery Keys, but it seems strange to me, and this is why I'm wondering: are there cracks in the code, or wasn't there ever a proper code?
Oh, well, I'm going to ask Juliet that question. Are there just cracks in the code, or was there never a code in the first place, Juliet?
Well, the reality is the code is a moving thing. It's we discover defects, and then we need to change the code accordingly. And I think the way the English legal system is labeled, everything's black and white. There's no gray area. And my concern here is always the innocent party that, suffers. Ultimately, you've got limitation period. So if I discover something after the limitation period as a purchaser, it's my problem. Even though initially you as the developer, you, the building control inspector, had an obligation to look at that thing. And that as well, it's a very difficult thing. It's very draconian. What if, you've got the Grenfell issue, etc. You've got a building burning down. You realize that it was not compliant, and your insurer says, "Look, we're not going to cover this. Your insurance is void." So you're left homeless. You potentially have a mortgage on a property that you need to pay off, etc. And you have void insurance that's not going to pay off. That's not a great position to be in. So we either need to salvage the position by offering some sort of sinking fund where there is a body within the code that can review things, and the innocent party isn't punished because a limitation period has exceeded, etc. And that's where I think the law errs. So perhaps we need to get out of what we've done previously and saying, look, this is the code and it's all encompassing. It needs to be reviewed consistently. But you need to understand what it wants to achieve. And it isn't always, well, I need to punish the building inspector, because is that going to help the innocent party, even if the building inspector is punished? So there needs to be more balance.
Chris, are we simply trying to put bandages on a system that is so creaky we should really burn it down and start again?
You're talking my language.
Intentionally so, Chris.
It feels that we're ruled by box tickers, and it's really frustrating that the system doesn't work because of the lack of framework to allow the box tickers to operate properly. So I don't mind the compliance, but if you're going to give me a load of compliance to comply with, provide me with the framework so I can comply with the compliance. But going back to Juliet, it's absolutely right. And the point that she makes, what's the saying? I'm sorry if it's a bit pithy, but if you do the crime, expect to do the time. So these people who are they're sharks. These developers who are building these blocks out of matchsticks and paper, yes, they need to be held to account. Absolutely. So yeah, the statute of limitations shouldn't apply to these people. They are criminals, and yes, they're messing with people's lives.
It seems that they messing with people's lives, and for the most part, get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not acceptable. It's not okay.
It's not okay, and I think it's perhaps something that we need to do something about. Michelle, the fighter for the people who don't, the unsung heroes. They shouldn't get away with it, Michelle.
I think it's a lack of experience and education, because ultimately, designers, builders, etc., are actually responsible for 12 years. They have to keep certain insurances in place for 12 years. And as far as I'm concerned, if they've built something, designed something, installed something that isn't fit for purpose, especially I don't understand why they're not claiming against their insurance. I think it's it would be a gate of some form, and it would be huge. But I think it's a fact that people just aren't understanding. If enough people got together and fought, and I think that might be the way of changing things. But construction changes so quickly and things change so quickly, the government just cannot keep up. So as Chris says, you've got tick boxes to be ticked, but the forms are consistently outdated. Every new form that comes out, it takes the government, 2 or 3 years. By the time it's come out, it's way gone. It's outdated, and they just can't keep up.
Oh, this is frustrating. Hamish, can you make it feel as if there's a way forward that we can look forward to?
Well, there actually is, and it's been around for sort of a couple of years now. And the Earl of Lytton has actually been working on a very, very significant way of taking it forward. And as Juliet, not blaming those who have been affected by something because that builder has not been compliant. There's accidental things that happen. One can understand that. But when you get actually sort of poor quality building with the incorrect materials, using actually sort of fire risk materials.
Yeah.
And the fact that somehow or other, the poor soul that bought the flat, because she's really got a task on her hands, hasn't she? Because she's working out the risk for people. She's trying to say to them, hey, look, no risk here. You can move in there, the value is going to stay the same and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden, kaplonk, the value of your property goes down by 200,000 because nobody wants to live there. You don't even want to live there yourself, but you can't do anything about it. Because as Juliet said, you're stuck with this. And unless somebody takes notice of what the Earl of Lytton is actually trying to do, it's the only thing that's come up which is anywhere close to taking, if you like, putting the blame is on the purchaser. I mean that's absurd. The whole thing is absurd.
All right, so it seems that although we've kicked up some dust and shoved around a bit of dirt, I'm not sure that we've got a solid summary that we can come to. Perhaps I can point to you, Michelle. Give me some. There must be something that we're shooting for that could be in the form of good news.
I think people need to improve their due diligence and their research and their understanding. And I don't think that they should just be able to look at one person, right, I've got a list, I've got this, that's it, I'm not going to do any more research. I think we need to take responsibilities for our own actions. And I think when we feel something's right, we need to do something about it and stand up to people, because ultimately, we've had this conversation again before, some of these builders are just bullies. And ultimately, if people have the confidence and the backup and the support to stand up against them, that's the only way we can create change.
Hamish, would you take us home?
Well, I mean, Michelle's so right. There are ways, but unfortunately, some poor soul who's been suckered into this particular sort of property, even by people who know what the situation's like. We've come across this as well. They know what it's like, but they're quite happy to sell that property on to some poor unsuspecting soul. And we don't have the fabric there. We don't know. I mean, we normally speak about this, about when we're speaking about roads, that there isn't the infrastructure. And at this moment in time, we don't have the infrastructure, and we don't appear to have the money to put that infrastructure right. So the only person that really strikes me as that needs to be made responsible is that builder, that developer, who has gone about it the wrong way.
Well, as usual, you've spoken a lot of sense, although it may be irritating. It always strikes me that the government always seem to find money to rebuild duck ponds, but they don't seem to be able to find money to reshape basic tenets of modern society, which is you should live somewhere that doesn't have the propensity to burn down around you. Thank you once again, Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Juliet Baboolal, as ever, gunnercooke, and Chris Gilsenan of Route Home, and of course our very special guest, Michelle Carr, who is a QS and legally trained and knows a lot of what she talks about. Fights the good fight for the contractor. But until next time, please, even within this miasma of monstrous proportions, please, there is a shining light to work towards. We are trying to create this, rebuild this from the inside, week by week, here at 10 o'clock on Thursdays on Property Quorum. Until the next time, please try and keep your feet on the ground, reach for the stars, and wear a bit of sunscreen. It's bloody hot out there, especially where Juliet is. Until next week, I wish you all well and have a lovely weekend. And look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.